Hello everyone, welcome back once again to DCS and Flight Simulator, but right now DCS, and today we're going to be taking a look at what it takes to fly helicopters in the two sims. It's a relatively straightforward process once you learn the basics, and that's what we're here to do. Sample teaches helos. So without further ado, we're going to hop into this Mi-24P. And we'll get started with that, and then we'll take a look at a couple other aircraft, or rotorcraft rather, in DCS, and then we'll hop on over to Flight Sim and apply those same lessons that we've learned in DCS, which in my opinion is slightly more difficult sim to fly, and we'll do those. So let's go ahead and head over to the active and get started here. Alrighty, now in the cockpit of our Mi-24, let's go over some of the basics. Could you not? Where's the radio in this damn thing? Could you not? There we go. I think, no, that's the IFF, isn't it? What did you say? No, that's the radio. Anyway, so let's pull up the control scheme here. We're going to ignore this over on the right. This is autopilot inputs and what the SAS is doing. We're going to be focusing on this left-hand side control scheme here. These are going to be my real-life inputs as we fly. So you can see if I move my cyclic around, you can, one, see the cyclic physically moving, and then two, you can see it moving in the center of those crosshairs. Same thing with my anti-torque pedals. They're not rudder pedals in a helicopter, they're anti-torque. And the same thing with my collective. Collective's in the upper left-hand quadrant, and then throttles are in the lower right-hand quadrant. Don't want to play with those too much since we are at ready to take off spin. So, helicopters are they're a more difficult item to operate than, you know, your standard fixed wing. Usually with fixed wings, once you're in the air, for the most part, you're okay. There's obviously turn coordination and stuff like that that you need to worry about. In helicopters, you're just constantly making fine adjustments to both your cyclic, your anti-torque pedals, your collective, and on some older helicopters, your throttle as well. Now, fortunately for us, the Mi-24 and the other helicopters we're looking at today are automatically throttled. So we don't have to worry about throttle control, so that's one less input, but we still have the pitch, roll, yaw, and elevation to worry about, all at the same time. And if you do those wrong, then you end up crashing. Quite simply, you end up crashing. So let's pull forward a little bit more here, and we'll do two takeoff types. First one we're going to do is going to be a standing takeoff on the brakes, so we're going to take off essentially straight up. Let's get back on this center line here. Oh, hello, Trek IR. I'd like to make a video, please. So we'll stay behind all these coalition aircraft, some Frogfoot, some A-10s. I think there were a couple of MiGs before. Those of you guys who've been around on the channel, this is that same counterattack mission that I did before. I just inserted myself into a hind instead of one of those two A-10s over there. So we are now on the brakes fully. This is my brake paddle. We're fully on the brakes, and you can see the wheel brake light is illuminated. And I'm going to add a little bit of anti-torque because as you add your collective, your helicopter is going to want to torque more in the direction. That's the reason the most rotorcraft, with the exception of like the CH-47 and stuff like that, have a tail rotor. You either need a tail rotor or you need some other sort of counter rotation. So like there was I think it was a McDonnell Douglas helicopter, the MD-800, I think, actually used the jet wash from the engine to act as a tail rotor. The KA-24, or sorry, KA-52 rather, is another example. It's got twin counter-rotating rotors that are on top of each other. Then there is, like I said before, there's the CH-47, which is a twin rotor, one in front, one in back, and those counteract each other. But if you've got just one rotor like we do, you need that tail rotor on the back to fight the rotational forces of the helicopter. So with our brakes on, let's go ahead and add some collective and add some anti-torque to fight those rotational forces. And we'll just keep our helicopter nice and balanced. Keep that anti-torque coming in, keep that anti-torque coming in. We are very heavy today. But just like that, we're in the air. I'm going to let the brakes out. And I'm realizing now I had a pretty aggressive wind setup for this mission, so we're drifting a little bit off to the right, but we are in a hover nonetheless. If I F2 real quick, you can see we are, in fact, off of the ground. So let's do a hover taxi now over to the active where all these F-16s are taking off. And I'm not really going to talk a whole lot through what I'm doing, but, you know, right now we're in what's called ground effect. And ground effect is essentially, it's just that. It's the effect of the ground being very close to your rudder wash. You get effectively extra lift for the price of nothing. And then the other portion to remember is as you increase your forward speed, your advancing blade increases in lift. And overall, your rotor increases in lift, but especially your advancing blades. So in the case of the Hind, we've got a left rotating rotor. So the right-hand side blade, the advancing blade, is going to have more lift the faster we go. So we're going to have to add more and more right cyclic the faster we fly. It's nothing extreme, but it's just something to be aware of. Alright, hover taxied out now. Let's go ahead and slow down. Can keep an eye on my control inputs on the upper left-hand corner as we make our left-hand turn here. So line up on runway 07. Stitch that taxi light since we're no longer taxiing. And we'll set down on the numbers. And then we'll take a look at the next takeoff that we can do, which is the more common for some of these heavier rotorcraft. If you're really fully loaded, you don't really want to be doing a full-on vertical takeoff. But we managed. Gentle touch, slowly reducing that collective till we're down. There's the mains. There's the nose. Okay, back on the ground. Let's get lined up on the runway here. And now we're going to do what's called a rolling takeoff. And this is what you'll primarily see Hinds doing in the real world. So we're off the brakes right now, collectives all the way to the ground. I am throwing in some left anti-torque to counteract our winds right now. But I'm going to slowly advance our collective, and I'm going to let the helicopter roll forward. I'm going to add some forward cyclic, just a little bit. And once we get a little bit of speed underneath our rotor, I'm going to leave the collective parked pretty much where it's at. We'll advance a little more. And then I'm going to just kind of let the cyclic return to neutral. Really fighting those winds. Oh, had it for a second. And there we are. Oh! Come on, WoW Switch. So we are now airborne, and then we can add more collective, since we are so heavy. And pitch the nose of the aircraft down. Gain some more speed. Leave the cyclic, or leave the collective rather, where it's at. Constantly making small adjustments to the cyclic and the anti-torque pedals. But that is essentially a successful takeoff, rolling takeoff, in the Mi-24. Let's go ahead and raise the gear. And we'll get a cool flyby. Alright, so takeoff complete. We'll get reconfigured for a landing here. And there is definitely a instrument-aided element to flying a helicopter. You're not really going to be able to fly a helicopter completely by the seat of your pants. Instruments do vary, rotorcraft to rotorcraft. I'd say that probably the most important one to pay attention to in the Hind is right in the middle there, below your artificial horizon. That little ball with a white strip, that is your turn coordinator, or whatever it's called in the Hind. And if you get really, really out of wax, like let's add a whole bunch of left anti-torque, you can see we're now flying super uncoordinated. You can see we're going this direction, but the nose is pointing this way. And you can do the same thing in the opposite direction. And sometimes if you're fighting wind, you will have to do this, but generally speaking, you want that ball to be as centered as you can. So we'll do a quick overfly of our origin pad, since we're pretty high right now. And then as we make our approach, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trade our collective. I'm going to start reducing our collective and increasing aft stick on the cyclic to help us in our braking. That'll slow our forward airspeed, and the goal is to maintain our vertical airspeed. So right now, if you look at our vertical speed indicator, we're in a very, very shallow descent, actually coming out of neutral. So I'm going to reduce collective a little bit now, and I'm going to start adding that rearward cyclic as we make a right-hand turn. You can see right now we're actually in a shallow climb because we're in that turn. I'm going to continue reducing collective. Because we're very slow right now. Now that vertical speed's running away from us because we lost a lot of our forward speed. So let's dump the nose just a little bit. Regain some of that forward speed, because hitting the ground at 500 feet per minute is gonna not be ideal. So we've got our LZ in mind, going back for that original pad. We're not doing any precision landing stuff. This is just to get you safely on the ground. As I have said many times during my time in Flight Sim, am not an astute rotorcraft pilot. I can fly them good enough to get where I need to go, deploy my IP, and then get back, or land if I'm doing it in Flight Sim. So now we'll start trading collective for airspeed. So back on the collective, and back on the cyclic. Down, I should say, on the collective, and back on the cyclic. Maintaining a relatively healthy rate of descent. Oh my god, there's a pole there. Okay. Okay. So we lost the main rotor. That's fine. Let's kill the engine, yeah? Let's... And this brings us to lesson number 2. Watch out for poles. We'll try that again in another rotorcraft, but it was looking to be a good landing, but it definitely ended up not being so hot, so... Watch your damn pole. I'll be back. Alright, and we find ourselves now inside of the lovely but laggy AH-64D Apache. Again, we are outfitted with a tail rotor. There's another AH-64 over there. Unlike the... There you are, the CH-47 over there, the twin rotor. So we're going to be applying some similar concepts in flight, but also doing a few different ones. So I'm going to go ahead and get started up here, and I will catch back up with you guys once we are ready to take off. Alright, started up in the Apache, that did not take too long. So similar, or completely different rather, layout, but same instruments we're going to want to follow in the Apache. So I've got our flight page up over here, and you're going to be able to see hopefully some familiar symbology. On the right is going to be our radar altitude, upper right is our pressure altitude, and this guy here on our left is our airspeed, and then we have that same little ball and walls to stay inside of while we're flying. Now obviously that's kind of hard to see, so the Apache also has a pilot sight with all of that same information before. So you've got your vertical, your altitude in radio. There is no pressure altitude, your airspeed, and then you've got that same ball. This guy here is just tracking, oh, hello, DCS. That's just tracking my head movements, so we don't need to worry about that. That's, like I said, it's just tracking where my head's at. And then this guy here, these pitch ladders here, will actually increase and decrease based on if we're ascending or descending. So up is ascending, down is descending. Very easy and straightforward. Wool Rock, no FLIR today. Let's go ahead and shut off or disable the park brake. It already was. Landing light is on. Let's unlock the tail wheel. And, oh, we're already moving. Alright. So we'll add just a hair cyclic. Let's turn our control scheme back on. Same thing as before, just a little bit more pronounced in the Apache. I like it. So again, throttles are going to stay at full. Those will always stay in the flight detent. And we'll add a little bit of collective and a little bit of forward cyclic, and hopefully that'll get us rolling. Oh, my wheel brakes are inverted. I need to rectify that. Good. Okay. So now there we go. Okay. So we can do the same thing as before. We can stamp on our brakes. And you can see that central pipper is actually going to tell us some information as to how we're drifting once we actually get up in the air. You could see it earlier when I move us forward. We go forward on the, I don't know, is that a VVI, a velocity vector indicator? I'm not entirely sure what it is. And then if I pull aft cyclic, we move aft. So we'll go hard on the brakes, increase our power. Oh yeah, my APU's still on. Whatever. And you can just do a dead vertical takeoff like that. We are airborne if I F2. There's your proof. Let's set back down real quick. So I can shut off that APU. And then we can set up for a rolling takeoff, which is less common in Apaches. They usually do, at least the ones that I've seen, just do a vertical takeoff. So again, a little bit of collective. And a little bit of forward cyclic. Or a lot of both, I suppose. There we go. 30% seems to be the sweet spot to get us rolling. Coming neutral on the cyclic, we'll continue to increase collective. And we're airborne. And we'll keep an eye on all of those parameters. That little ball in the center is getting away from us to the left. You can see our radio altitude's increasing, as is our forward airspeed. And then that little guy over there is telling us what direction we're drifting. So even though we're flying coordinated right now, we've got a relatively strong-ish wind that's canting us. So if I actually want to align the aircraft with our direction of drift, I would do that. So we're now uncoordinated, but we're in line with the wind. So the aircraft is flying in a straight line. No gear or anything to worry about in the Apache. We'll do a quick flight onto the ramp over here. The Apache is still not super well optimized, unfortunately. So even with multi-threading, it just doesn't stay happy for too long. Yeah, this is abysmal. I'm gonna pause and see if I can find some processes. Oh, look at that! You just have to threaten it. See, violence solves everything. It's not reducing my collective. We're descending at a nice, healthy rate. You can see our radio altimeter is indicating we're in a downward direction of travel. And you can also see our number decreasing. Try and keep that coordination going. With the wind not necessarily flying in coordination with the turn coordinator, for lack of a better term. What's that down there? Is that it's an E3. Let's go touchdown by the E3. And you can also see the added symbology on the Apache. Once you get, I think it's sub 200 feet, you actually get a physical bar that will indicate your height from the ground. So we're coming in pretty screaming hot right now, 50 knots. Get into some of this ground effect here. Two feet off the ground. And settle. There we are on the ground in the Apache. We'll do one more takeoff. Fly back to the ramp where we took off from. I think we'll take a look at maybe one more aircraft in DCS from a control standpoint, and then we'll hop over into Flight Sim. So again, nothing too dramatic on the takeoff other than the abysmal frame rate. We'll get a little bit more aggressive with our flying this time around since it's a combat simulator. See if we can crack 90 knots on the way there. Still ascending. I think I'm getting right on the threshold of saturating the SAS. Here's 90 knots. Here's 100 knots. Looking for our LZ. I can see it just out of the corner of the window there. We're going to come in over the hush houses, turn around, and set down where I think we were before. So again, a lot of dip and collective and trading that for decreased pressure in the cyclic. We do have that really nice velocity vector indicator in the Apache, and that'll tell us exactly where we're headed for. Hush house number 1, hush house number 2. Do we have a third? It does not look like it. Over a pair of UH-60s. Adding a little more collective as we approach the ground. Coming into the ground effects now. And it's just a lot of hand-eye coordination. Like I said, I am in no way, shape, or form an astute rotor pilot. It's going to be my disclaimer pretty much every time I fly a rotorcraft in the sim, because I'm just not good at it. Plain and simple. Oh, slam the tail wheel into the ground. There we are. Relatively safe touchdown. Let's take a look at one more aircraft in the sim. In DCS, rather, and then we will take a look at flying helos in Flight Sim. Alrighty, and last up for our DCS roundup is going to be the KA-52 Black Shark, the third iteration, the KA-52-3 in DCS. This obviously, as you can see, maybe not so well from the inside, but from the outside we've got those twin counter-rotating rotors, so we do not have a tail rotor this time around. Those are going to do a much better job of counteracting each other than the tail wheel did, or tail rotor rather did, on the other aircraft that we've looked at. So we'll go ahead and tap the brakes. I have my controls inputs on the lower left hand side this time, and we'll do the same thing we did before. We'll slam on the brakes, we'll add collective in, tail heavy this time around. There we go. Definitely going to have to work out some trim here once we get all set up. But nonetheless, there we are, hovering in the KA-52. Shaky hover, but a hover nonetheless. F2 for proof. And we'll set back down. Alright, a little bit of trim fix there. Now we will go for a rolling takeoff. Collective in. A little bit of left anti-torque because I overcorrected, but nonetheless, there we are, airborne in the KA-52. Let's bring in the gear. And once again, our symbology has changed. It's the nature of the beast. You're going to have to learn symbology in your own aircraft. But the big ones to watch in the KA-52 are going to be our primary attitude indicator. We have a secondary one as well, but we're going to be watching the primary one, as well as our vertical speed indicator. That's going to let us know if we're climbing or descending. We do have an airspeed indicator there off to the left, but I don't think we'll be getting too quick today. Let's go ahead and gain some altitude here. See where a good place to set down might be. Looking to the right here. It looks like a glorious spot. Is that an Mi-8 on the ramp? Nope, it's another KA-50 or 52. So let's drop gear. Do an overflight. A lot less side-to-side visibility in the KA-52. Actually, let's change the plan. Let's try and land in that, what is it, a hexagon? Try and land in that box next to him. A little bit high, a lot of it fast, so we'll, again, nose up a little bit, trade off some of that airspeed. Really terrible forward visibility. Really bad, even with track IR. Oh, there's the ground effect, bobbing us back up just a little bit. Come forward just a hair. That looks good there. Let's go ahead and set down. A little bit rough of a touch, but we are down safely. Sort of inside of the box here. Do a mild reverse. There we go. So that is the KA-52. Let's head over into Flight Sim, and we'll take a look at the, I don't know, the 206 with 4 rotors. What is this? Is it the 407? Yeah, Bell 407. We'll take a look at the 407 and see what that's all about. Okay, now loaded up in Flight Sim, we're going to take those same skill sets and tactics that we learned in DCS and transfer them over to Flight Sim. We're not going to have on-screen controls this time around. I'd have to set up a few cameras to do that, and I don't think that's going to really aid the situation. So I'll just talk a little bit more about what I'm doing, as compared to DCS, where I let the imagery of my controls do the talking. So we'll hop back in the cockpit here and get set. So I'm going to go ahead and apply some anti-torque. And we'll add in some collective. It's a little bit, that's a lot too much anti-torque, holy smokes. We're dead. Now it's not enough. Interesting. That must be some wind. I don't know. We'll blame the wind. When in doubt, blame the wind, right? Let's come back around and set down on the officially marked helipad, and we'll try that again. Decentish touch. Okay. Anti-torque in. Here comes the collective. Real gentle. There we go. That's much better. That might have been an initial takeoff situation, but there is a takeoff in the 407. Obviously, this being a skid-based helicopter, we can't do any rolling takeoffs. So we'll do a quick lap out over the Statue of Liberty, see if there's somewhere there we can set down. Lots of birds. Let's not hit them. Actually, if I was thinking, maybe we would have headed to LaGuardia or JFK. Maybe we'll do that on the flight back, but we'll keep zooming out over to the Statue of Liberty. Again, the two primary instruments we're going to want to keep an eye on is our attitude indicator, as well as our vertical speed. You can see we're at about a 400 foot per minute climb. If I reduce collective, that drops. But I can leave collective where it's at and roll my cyclic back a little bit, and now you can see we're in a climb again, but we're trading off airspeed for that altitude. So it's just a big old balancing act. Constant fine little inputs to maintain what you're doing. You don't want to be overflying the aircraft by any extent. It's all just real small inputs. If you get into a situation where you're doing really big inputs, you're either in adverse conditions or you're overflying the rotorcraft more than likely. There's Lady Liberty. A lot of right anti-torque. Left cyclic. And we'll neutralize our controls. Keeping it a little bit of left cyclic right now. We'll get our anti-torque pedal set to keep that ball happy. And at a really steady rate of descent. Let's get some airspeed under the rotors here. Same principle with retreating and advancing blade as we discussed before in the hind. You will get more lift the faster you go. In fact, that's part of auto-rotating. We're not going to talk about auto-rotating in this video. I might come back to it if enough of you guys are interested. But a big part of auto-rotation is keeping your rotor speed up so that you have that lift. In fact, that's how autogyros fly, is forward speed of the pusher prop keeps the aircraft unpowered lift rotor moving. And they're obviously designed to accommodate that sort of stuff. It is a little bit nerve-wracking doing this over water I can't see, but hey, we're doing all right. We haven't crashed yet. And again, trading airspeed for pitch. Basically neutral on the cyclic right now. Or I'm sorry, on the collective, almost no collective, and adding a bunch of collective as we settle back in and completely miss our touchdown point. So we'll reset. Caution that ground effect as we come in over the pier. There's that ground effect. Let's not smack the tail on the building. Let's go. Okay. Alright. Alright. I was going to say let's go for the big helipad instead. Where the 407 just stops on a dime. So that whole trading airspeed for altitude situation I was talking about is, okay, let's just redo the approach altogether. It does change depending on what you're flying. What is that? Oh, it's just a red light in the distance. So your aerodynamic braking, for lack of a better term, is going to change based on the rotorcraft you're flying. We saw in the Apache, Hind, and KA-52 that it was pretty arrested, your rate of descent control. Whereas in the 407, you can do some pretty wacky stuff and get away with it. And I don't know how accurate this flight model is. It is a default Asobo design, but I think this was originally slated to be a payware aircraft. I'm glad it wasn't, but... There we go. Nice settle down in the 407. Not too aggressive of a approach. We'll head over to LaGuardia and we'll do an aggressive set down on some of their ramps. So I'll catch up with you guys once we're visual of LaGuardia. Okay, the real question is, can I stick it in here? Probably not. Losing rotor RPM. Yeah, no, we got it. All day. All day. Look at that. I'm pro. I'm a pro. I'm not.